Hi there, everybody. Welcome to our presentation, Speaking the Unarguable Truth, Sensations, Emotions, Wants. I'm Ansley Tripp. I'm a psychotherapist with embodied counseling and coaching, and this is Jocelyn.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn DiChiara. I'm also with embodied counseling and coaching.
Yeah, so welcome, and we're going to be speaking a little bit about unarguable truths and this process, sensations, emotions, wants, or what we call SEW. So let's just get into it. Yeah? So what if our clients didn't need us? Ultimately, isn't that the goal of therapy? What if we could teach our clients a skill that allows them to befriend their nervous system, leaving them with the power to self-regulate at any moment and gain clarity on what they are truly feeling and wanting? In this presentation, we aim to demonstrate the healing power of utilizing sensations, emotions, wants, or better known as SEW. A step-by-step process created by our supervisor, Julie Caldwell, that can transform relationships. Relationship with our nervous system, relationship with self, relationships with others, and relationship with our worldview. This process of SEW provides a path for both clients and therapists to become aware of the messages that their bodies are trying to tell them, making the unconscious conscious, and anchoring in unarguable truths rather than stories that perpetuate dysregulation and conflict in relationships. Transformation occurs within healing relationships. And SEW is an accessible tool that empowers individuals to provide their own relational healing through speaking their unarguable truths and listening to their sensations, emotions, wants. So Bruce Lipton says, if we change our perception, we change our biology immediately, which I think is so cool. But how do we know if our perception is accurate? How do we know what is actually happening? Well, we say with unarguable truths. So before I describe to you what is unarguable, I kind of want us to just land with what is arguable. And it's actually pretty simple. If someone can argue with what you're saying, then what you're saying is arguable. Simple as that. And of course, I personally feel, and I know Jocelyn does as well, feel that it's really important to think critically and challenge norms, beliefs, and ideas. But when it comes to relationships, and again, relationships with others and yourself, resisting and focusing on the arguable really can take us into blame, escalation, and disconnection. Whereas shifting towards unarguable truths allows for true connection and ownership of one's authentic experience. So, it's really hard to tell sometimes what's going on out here. Sometimes we really might think that our perception is so accurate, and I'm sure it is sometimes. But also it's like, did that person just cut me off because they're mad at me? Or did that grocery store clerk just give me the side eye? I can't really grasp what's going on out here that easily. It's all pretty arguable. But what I do know is that, okay, that grocery store clerk just looked at me and I just felt a pit in my stomach. That person just cut me off and my jaw is tight. So for the sake of this presentation and what we're talking about with SEW, we say that sensations are unarguable. We also say the same about emotions. So emotions are unarguable. And when I'm talking about emotions, I mean pure kind of distilled down emotions. So I am mad, I'm sad, I'm scared. Pretty hard to argue with. Now, if someone says, I feel like you're being an asshole, that's arguable, right? So that's not a pure distilled down emotion. So for the sake of this, right, we're saying, okay, those pure emotions, unarguable. And lastly, we're saying that wants are unarguable. So you get to want what you want. I get to want what I want. Jocelyn gets to want what she wants.
Yeah.
She also gets to not want what she doesn't want, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, I know I could go for a chili cheese dog right now. I want that. And that's hard to argue with, right? So we get to want what we want, and so do our clients. So wants are unarguable as well. So sensations, emotions, and wants are all unarguable truths.
Okay. So we're going to be teaching you this process, SEW. And what we're really doing when we teach our clients this tool is we're really developing interoceptive awareness in our clients, an understanding of their inner landscape and how to make meaning of it. So interoceptive awareness facilitates regulation and an integrated sense of self, and therefore contributes to health and well-being. There's empirical evidence of the connection between interoceptive awareness and the regulation of emotion, as well as links showing the lack of interoceptive awareness with emotional disorders, which is opening lots of new doors for how to work with difficult to treat emotional disorders such as depression, PTSD, and substance use disorder. Interoception operates at the preconscious level, wherein a person is primarily unaware of their bodily processes. But these processes can enter consciousness when top-down attentional resources are directed to the process. And that's exactly what we're doing with SEW. SEW is both a top-down and a bottom-up approach, and we're helping to reintegrate unprocessed emotions. So sensations. So we know that some people have a really hard time when we say, what's going on in your body, right? So we want to make it real simple. And so we invite you to just start with people, with your clients, but just talking about sensations that we talk about all the time. Like, gee, my throat feels kind of scratchy. I think I might be getting sick. Or my stomach is growling. I think I'm hungry. Or my head is pounding. I have such a headache. Right? So right now, everybody, just say out loud a sensation that you're noticing right now. Okay, hang on one second. I feel my mouth's feeling a little bit dry. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. Okay, now I'm curious, how many of you just thought to check to see if your throat was also dry and you wanted a drink of water? Yeah, right? So this is called limbic resonance, right? And we mammals are wired to be very attuned to those around us. It's survival. It's protected us and kept us in the pack. So this limbic resonance is our capacity to connect with another's nervous system and their felt sense. So if I connect with my sensations and what's happening for me, and another is encouraged to connect with their sensations in their body, and we both are in what's really true for us and what's happening for us in the present moment, then we are better able to connect with each other, and that's really what intimacy is. Mm-hmm. So sensations are the here and now. It is what's true. It's what's actually happening in the present moment, and we can swear to it. It's unarguable, right? Just like Ansley said, no one can argue with the fact that my throat is scratchy or my head is pounding. So just noticing and naming sensations signals to our amygdala to slowly shift out of threat response. It lets our body know, hey, you know what, we're listening. We hear you, right? And this is what we mean when we talk about befriending our nervous system. We don't have to fear our sensations. We actually can approach them from a place of curiosity and wondering, what is my body trying to tell me? And this is how we help develop greater awareness and self-regulation skills in our clients. So let's look at what the literature says about sensations. So Eugene Gendlin believed genuine psychotherapy begins at that point going beyond intellectual approach by helping the client to immediate present experiencing of their problems. And he also believed that before we have explicit words, concepts, and symbols, we understand the now viscerally through experiencing it. And he coined the term felt sense. So lastly, there's research that states that sensations from the body underlie most, if not all, of our emotional feelings, particularly those that are most intense and most basic to survival. All right, so we've talked about sensations, and now we're going to talk about emotions. So sensations tell us what our emotion is, what emotion we're experiencing. And just like Ansley said, we keep it real simple to mad, sad, scared, glad, and sexual. Not because there's research that says these are the 5 most important emotions. Actually, research is a little bit all over the place on what emotions are most important and which ones matter the most. But for the purpose of this process, we work with these by distilling it down to these 5 because we want to make it accessible for our clients, right? Mm-hmm. And we're really trying to get them to notice when they are in a threat response. So mad, sad, and scared is our threat response, and we're pretty wired for that. Or to notice when they're in a more expansive creative state, such as glad and sexual. Now we know that sexual isn't an emotion either, right? But we keep sexual in there because we believe anyone gets to feel anything at any time for any reason. And when we're experiencing sexual feelings, we may want to create a baby, but we also might want to create a spreadsheet or write a book or a painting. So it's really our life force. It's that creative, expansive energy that we all have that we can tap into when we are feeling safe. And we're just trying to help people notice the difference when they're in those two different kinds of states.
Yeah.
So let's see what some of the literature says about emotions. So early theories of emotions, going back to Descartes and James Lang, emphasized the link between interoception and emotions by arguing that emotions are evoked by the perceptions of physical responses of the body and cannot exist without the experience of bodily feelings. Sensory information coming from the body gets organized in the region of the brain called the insular cortex. The job of the insular cortex is to interpret the interoceptive data coming from the body, that felt sense, and to form emotions that correspond to the signals from the body. So let's get into the emotions. So let's start with mad. So when we are experiencing mad, we are experiencing an intrusion or an obstacle. So the question that we ask is, what are you getting that you don't want? Intrusion. And what is it that you want that you're not getting? What's the obstacle to that? So the adaptation is a mobilized response. It prepares the mammal to fight. And it shows up in sensations of fierce face, clenched teeth, tightness in the jaw or shoulders or neck, heat, activated extremities. And the way that we help a client move energy when they're experiencing anger is actually to growl or roar or push against something, right? We love to push against something when we're having that kind of boundary challenge of what are we getting that we don't want or what do we want that we're not getting. It feels really good to help a client to push against a wall or push against another person or our hands. Sometimes to tantrum, to slam pillows, scream or yell. So now you might be thinking like this seems really crazy, right? But we actually believe that learning about our emotions and experiencing our emotions doesn't have to be this big, heavy, serious thing where you have to sit down and be all intense. We actually like to help people get into their body and really experiencing their emotions as just energy that's wanting to move. And that's how we explain it to them, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we invite them to try movements and to make sounds just to help with that process. And we also ask for their consent. We also ask, are you willing to feel as mad as you feel, as sad as you feel, or as scared as you feel? Because getting consent can really help set the tone of safety and allow some of those emotions to come up and energy to start to move.
Yeah, especially, sometimes in a society where getting mad might not be that
Acceptable.
Really acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Or family systems or...
Learned messaging around anger, sure. So scared, we love our little scared picture here. So when we are feeling scared, the question we ask is, what is the perceived threat or danger? And there's two kinds of fears. There's agitated fear and there's frozen fear. So agitated fear, the adaptive value is that it prepares the body to flee, fight or flight, right, run. It shows up in sensations as impulses to run, a shakiness if you can't run in that situation maybe, shallow, fast breath, and a knotted or upset stomach. Limbs are mobilized, want to move, right? And so we invite someone to move energy when they're in agitated fear to just run, like literally run in place or maybe take a lap around the room, sometimes go outside, run around, but to just let that energy just move with the impulse to want to run. Sometimes we'll say, do you want to have a freak out moment, right?
Yeah.
And we'll all freak out together. Just let it shake off. Frozen fear is a high threat mode, right? So the body's going into shutdown. Very little movement. It is designed to keep the animal from running away and getting caught. And it shows up in sensations of very shallow breath, immobilized limbs, physical collapse, and this is where you might see some disassociation from the body. So we help the client move energy when they're in frozen fear with micro movements. And I like to describe this sort of to yogi people who know Savasana or the dead man's pose. It's to just, you start to wiggle your toes, start to wiggle your fingers. You're just starting to bring movement back online. Mm-hmm. And sad. So the question we ask when someone is experiencing sadness is, what is the perceived loss? And the adaptive value of sadness is that it prepares the body to adjust to not having the resource, whether it's a loving person, caretaker, a soothing presence. And it signals to others to come towards, whereas anger signals to others to move away, right? And it shows up in sensations of maybe a lump in the throat, an urge to cry, a collapse in a heaviness of chest and heaviness of heart. And we help someone move energy when they are feeling sadness by crying or getting comfort, maybe a pillow or a self-hug or imagining comfort. Yeah. And lastly, we had fun with this slide too. Glad sexual, when we are feeling safety, right? The question we want to ask is, how can I enjoy and celebrate? And the adaptive value is that it opens the body to experience and connection, as opposed to being closed in protection, open to connection. And it shows up in sensations of deeply relaxed breathing, sense of safety and openness, maybe tingling through the body, excitement. Movement is easy and fluid from this place. Mm-hmm. And we just want to encourage a client when they're experiencing glad or sexual feelings, how do you want to enjoy the flow of energy? And sometimes people want to just sway or dance. Some people like to raise their arms and connect with all that is and the energy, greater energy of the universe. So whatever the person is wanting to do to kind of enjoy that energy, right? That's a really great place to help somebody.
Yeah. All right. So kind of putting all this together, I really wanted to show you all this emotion arc that we created, and really, putting together how our bodies really respond whenever something happens, right? And we get a lot of knowledge about this from animals in the wild, which I find really, really cool. And Peter Levine has done a bunch of work to really describe how animals respond in the wild and how that's related to humans and how we respond. And Peter Levine has really noticed that animals don't get stuck in trauma responses, which I find really interesting. And it's postulated that that's because they are allowed to fully move through the full arc of emotion and fully move through their body's impulses. Like, their bodies are allowed to respond and respond appropriately to get to the other side. So with this arc, I kind of want to demonstrate that, where something happens, right? So it could be anything. So for a human, it could be that I stub my toe. It could be that someone pulls out in front of me on the highway. It could be that my partner just said something and I think that it was rude. Something happens. And then we start to have a physiological response, right? So my jaw gets tight, my stomach drops. We start to have the physiological response. Same thing for animals, right? Just kind of how Jocelyn was just talking about with scared. So maybe an animal hears a rustling in the bushes, and so they start to have a physiological response. They turn, they orient to threat, they decide if the smartest thing is mobilized fear or immobilized. So let's say they run. They follow their body's impulses. They run, they get away. So what they're doing here is they're fully moving through this full arc of emotion. They're following the impulses to get to the other side here. Now, with us humans and our big, beautiful brains that we've developed, we have, at some points, whether it's conscious or not, decided sometimes that it's better not to feel, better not to go towards the uncomfortable feeling. Like, maybe it's unconscious, or maybe it's, I don't have time for this. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Like, I don't have time to be sad right now. So again, orienting you to something happens. Someone pulled out in front of me on the highway. I start to have a physiological response. My jaw tightens. My stomach starts to get all churny. then that starts to signal to me that I'm starting to feel an emotion. So maybe I'm feeling scared. And whether it's conscious or not, a lot of the times us humans can cut that emotion off and say, better not to feel that right now. And then we start to operate and make decisions from this place here moving forward. And that's what we're doing a lot of the times in this world. I know I'm totally guilty of it.
Yep.
But with this process, SEW, what we're really looking towards is to bring that interoceptive awareness in, right? Notice what the physiological response is that's happening. Pair that with the emotion and allow yourself to feel safe enough or supported enough to fully feel that emotion and allow yourself to get to this arc and getting to the other side. And with that, that also means following your body's impulses. To get over this hump, kind of go towards the uncomfortable feeling and get to the other side of what it is that you really want, what you're really truly wanting, and from an actually regulated state, not from this place. So, the last part of this process is wants. So we've talked about sensations, we've talked about emotions, and now we're at wants. And Ginlin had just this really great quote that I wanted to share that really feels like it encompasses the wants part of this. So as you search to give words for what you feel, there's a wonderful result. Something inside of you changes. You relax. Your body becomes more energized because something you'd been holding on to released. Often there's a physical change, such as a deep breath, or relaxation of the shoulders, or other areas where there's been tightness. This change, which is perceived directly in the body, is called a felt shift. New possibilities emerge from what had been stuck in places, and you come to understand what you truly feel and want. We are likely to have a new perspective on the original situation. And so what we're really saying here is that increased body awareness enables access to our more essential self and what's actually happening. From there, we can organize our energies towards what we want, all while being in alignment with our body's messages and not abandoning them. We don't want to abandon those messages because they serve such an important, great purpose.
Okay, so Ansley and I are now going to do a short demo for you of this SEW process so you can see what it looks like.
Yeah, so Jocelyn is brave enough to be our little fish for the demo. And so I'm going to just go through the process of sensations, emotions, wants, and just show you how we utilize this. So for the first step of this process, I'm going to ask Jocelyn to just take a minute to complain about an issue. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but ideally kind of like a full body complaint. So I'm wondering if there's something that you can find like to take a minute to complain about.
Yes, I have very much been struggling with this issue in the last 24 hours. So my ex, I think, is pushing all my buttons because he's over-involved in my son's life and wants to control every decision he makes and wants him to go to the best business school and he wants him to prepare for it as a freshman in college already. And it drives me crazy. And I get so worked up about it every time because I think it's too much. I just think it's way too much involvement. And my son is 21 and needs to learn how to make his own decisions and figure things out for himself. And I don't think he's letting him do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last 24 hours. Wow.
Yeah.
So you'll see that Jocelyn just had a really great story, and I believe her, and I'm right there with her, right? And I'm also wondering what's happening in her body. So I'm going to ask her that next. So Jocelyn, I'm wondering, are you having any sensations in your body?
Yeah, my jaw is definitely tight. I'm clenching. Definitely, my head is a little pounding up here. I'm tight through here. My neck and shoulders feel tense, tight.
Okay.
Stomach maybe a little swirly here.
Okay. All right, so I'm hearing jaw tight, head tight, neck tight, swirling in the stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So Jocelyn has quite a few sensations happening, which is quite normal. And I'm going to ask her to kind of hone in on which sensation might be the loudest. So Jocelyn, which sensation is most wanting your attention? Which sensation is the loudest?
Jaw.
Jaw. I mean, it was the first thing you said, so okay.
Yeah.
The jaw. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I want you to just kind of tune into your jaw. No need to fix it, change it. Just kind of tune into your jaw. And I'm wondering, is your jaw mad, sad, scared, glad, or sexual?
Mad.
Mad. Great. Seems it came through really clear for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we just did there was we paired the physiological response to an emotion. And usually when you ask and distill it down to those 5, mad, glad, sad, scared, sexual. Okay. So we're going with mad.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you would like to do with that mad? Any impulses your body is wanting you to follow?
Yeah, I think I want to push and clench.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't want you to do everything for him!
Yeah.
Yeah, that felt good. Holy cow.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming back to the body, checking in. How's your body doing right now?
Good. That felt like I stirred things up a little. I feel a little looser up here doing that. It felt good. Yeah. I felt like something moved a little through here, my jaw.
Yeah. Particularly curious about the jaw.
Yeah.
How's it doing?
Good, because I feel like I really clenched. So now it feels a little like I can loosen it a little.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I heard you say this, but I just want to check in and make sure. Do you feel like some of that energy has moved?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
I think so.
Well then, from this place, great job breathing, moving. I want to invite you to continue to breathe and move and wonder with what is it that you really want? What do you really want?
I want him to back off. I want him to let my son make his own decisions.
Okay. You want him to back off?
Yes.
And what would you get if you got that?
I would feel better about my son's growth, I think.
Okay.
I want him to develop his own sense of autonomy,
Oh.
I think.
Okay. I want him to develop his own sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, breathing and moving while we're wondering. We're just wondering. Because what would you get if your son had his own sense of autonomy?
I wouldn't feel this need to like jump in and get involved or to protect him.
Oh.
I think I'd be more at peace.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you want peace.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. How's that landing?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that feels a lot better than me feeling like I want to do something. I have to do something.
Yeah. So I'm hearing it feels better. Wondering if maybe that feels like an unarguable truth for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to feel peace about my son's process and growing and adulting. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't want it controlled by anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I see control. We go
So I'm going to fight.
right back to that
Yeah.
jaw. Yeah. 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 Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, Jocelyn, would you be willing to state your full unarguable truth here?
Yes. So my jaw is tense, my neck and shoulders are really tense. I'm really mad because I don't want to fight with my ex about this all the time. What I really want to feel peace about my son's growing up and making his own decisions about his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that lands.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
Great. So y'all just got to see a little demo here of how this process works. And, I encourage you all to try this yourselves. And then we also have some tips for practitioners. And, really quickly, I'll just kind of go over what we just did again. So I had Jocelyn complain for a minute. Then I had Jocelyn tap into her body, find some sensations. We landed on one sensation that was the loudest to her, which was her jaw. We then paired that with an emotion. So is the jaw, is that mad, sad, scared, glad, sexual? She said mad. From there, we then asked the mad question. So remember, Jocelyn was talking about the questions that we ask with each emotion. So for mad, it's what am I getting that I don't want, or what am I not getting that I want? So we kind of explored that for a minute. And then I asked Jocelyn if she had any way that she wanted to follow the impulses of her mad, and she wanted to push, growl. She kind of stomped a little bit. Really, it seemed like her clenching her jaw really tightly was important for her.
Yeah.
And she seemed to get to the other side of this, where she felt a shift in her energy, where a shift in her jaw not being as tight, a shift in her neck and shoulders not being as tight. And from there, we were able to wonder, well, what is it that you're really wanting? And so from there, we were able to distill down her unarguable truth, rather than the complaining in the beginning being a lot of blame about her ex-husband, and which we all love to do sometimes, right?
Yes.
It can feel really good, yes. And with this process, we're getting down to that unconscious, that pure, unarguable truth. My jaw is tight. I'm mad. I'm getting something I don't want, and what I really want is peace about this process. So that's what we did. And yeah, so here are some tips for practitioners.
Yeah, okay. So first, we want you to really follow the person's energy, just like Ansley did with me, really questioning what is most calling your attention, and being curious and helping the client to be curious about what's happening in their body. Consent is key, right? We want to get the person's, ask them if they're willing to check inside their body, and if they're willing to feel as mad, sad, scared, glad, or sexual as they feel. Getting consent so that there's really that sense of safety with you present to go there and allow energy to move. Start simple, right? Just like we talked about, simple sensations. And this is a whole new literacy. We're never taught how to describe and talk about our sensations, just like we barely know how to talk about emotions in this culture. So a lot of times we give a word list to some of our clients to just give them some ideas of how to describe sensations in your body. You are body mapping specifically for your client, right? So while we gave you some examples of how mad, sad, scared, glad, sexual show up in the body in general terms, we actually want you to be really paying attention to your client and how it shows up in their body, because it's different for everybody. So you're helping them to be aware of their own body signals and how emotions are showing up in their body. We want you to mirror the client, can really help with that limbic resonance as they're describing parts of their body and sensations, right? Sometimes touching that part yourself, moving with them, encourages them to move and explore and experiment in this way. We want you to maintain openness and curiosity without any attachment to an outcome, right? Nothing needs to happen here. It's really a self-inquiry process with another person and helping them to get to know themselves and their body better. Stand up and move as much as you can. I know we're not used to doing this, and this isn't always comfortable for everybody, but if we're trying to get people to be more embodied and more aware of their body sensations and interoceptive awareness, we need to model it and do it with them and teach them how to do it and have fun with it and make it playful. And lastly, like Ansley just talked about, getting to the bottom of the wants, right? A lot of people will state the blame or I just want my partner to stop, to just do the dishes. And it's like, okay, and if you got that, just like Ansley kept questioning me, we want you to keep questioning. And then what would you get? So that you get to the quality state, the feeling state of what a person would get, as opposed to an action of somebody else that you're wanting, right? So really you're trying to get to that quality underneath.
Yeah. So again, we're going to encourage you to try this at home. Try this. Really experiment yourself. Have your own laboratory experiment and see how this works for you. And then maybe this is something that you'll want to utilize with your clients. Maybe this is something you can utilize yourself, like in session with a client secretly, right? Really play around with this and see how you can kind of distill your own life, physiological responses, emotions down to your own unarguable truths. Which now brings us to the point of who do we use SEW with? And who do we not use SEW with? Which clients is this appropriate with? So I am going to teach you all something called the egg theory of psychopathology. And this was created by a psychologist by the name of Monty Atkinson. He lives in Boulder, Colorado, and he taught this to my supervisor, Julie Caldwell, who has really just passed this information down along to us. I have found this extremely helpful in really kind of conceptualizing who is in front of me in terms of a client. And, it may seem like it's putting individuals in boxes or eggs, but I have found in my experience that this really allows room for me to not pathologize and to not put people into boxes, because this is all of our experience. So this is a continuum, and these are kind of states of consciousness that individuals can have, from healthy all the way to someone experiencing psychosis. And I just want to say that this is not an us versus them situation. This is an all of us. I'm talking about all of us when I talk about these eggs and these states of consciousness. I know for myself, in all the parts that I have, I can see a lot of myself in all of these eggs, or at least the potential to house one of these eggs. So this really isn't, again, an us versus them. This is an all of us. And so I'll just orient you to this first egg. And again, I have healthy in quotation marks, because what is healthy, right? How do we know what healthy is? But we're just going to kind of try and conceptualize it here. So these eggs, like I said, are our consciousness. And you'll see that the egg is divided into two parts, with the right side being unconscious and the left side being conscious. Now, I'm sure we all know that the majority of our consciousness is unconscious. I think something like 95% of our consciousness is unconscious. And thank goodness it is. Because if I were to perceive every noise, fly, heartbeat, if I were perceiving absolutely everything, yes, I would probably go crazy. And so would you. So it's really important that we have a separation between our unconscious and our conscious. And that separation is represented by these defenses right here. So we have defenses to keep our consciousness separate. And in the healthy egg, you'll see that the defenses have little gaps in them. And that's because the defenses are permeable. meaning that we can take unconscious, unprocessed material, we can move it through that defense barrier, bring it into consciousness, and we can work with it, we can process it, and we can actually sometimes move that energy out, like you might be seeing here with SEW, when we're moving energy out. So for someone in this healthy state, for example, they might, perceive someone talking to, or someone might be talking to them and it really might remind them of something that their father would say to them. But in this healthy state, they can bring that unconscious material, they can bring it to the conscious, they can recognize, oh, this isn't my father talking to me. This is something that reminds me of my father talking to me. I'm feeling, a heaviness in my chest or a tightness in my jaw, and I'm feeling scared or sad, right? And then I can move through that energy. So a person in this state might be able to do SEW on their own. Actually, that's what's happening, right? So yeah. So then we move to the next egg, which looks very similar to the healthy egg, but it's the neurotic egg, again in quotation marks. Really the difference here, you'll see that the barrier's still permeable, but the difference here is that this person might need a little assistance of going to the unconscious, bringing that material into the conscious and processing it. So hence our clients, right? Like there are certain things that our clients need help working through. And that's what we're here for. And so there is just kind of unconscious material sitting there waiting to be processed, and just needing a little assistance. And so yeah, with this is a great egg or level of consciousness to work with and to utilize SEW with. It's such a great mechanism to go to the unconscious, bring that material to the conscious, and process it. And with this individual, eventually we might work to where they can do SEW on their own. Or maybe they're doing SEW on their own sometimes, and then we're doing it with them sometimes. So then moving on to the next egg, we have an individual who's experienced trauma. So you'll see that the defenses are still permeable, but at this point the gaps are rather large, and the defenses have become pretty leaky. And so what's happening here is this is where the defenses have failed. Too much, too fast, too soon has happened. And it's just chipped away at the defenses to make them a little leaky. So unprocessed memories and experiences can kind of contaminate the conscious mind and leave it where someone might be unable to function. So with this individual, it's really important to recognize that their defenses are leaky, and for us as clinicians to stand in as like a co-ego for them, to stand in as their defenses. And so with someone who's experienced trauma, SEW can be extremely useful to provide a certain amount of scaffolding on those defenses. But it might be useful with someone experiencing trauma, it is very useful with someone experiencing trauma to use your discretion as a professional clinician to recognize what might be useful to work with SEW. Maybe it's not working with the trauma specifically, right? Maybe it's working with other everyday things to help build that scaffolding, to help reestablish that relationship with the nervous system and know that they can trust it in certain areas. And then using other trauma-informed methods or models to work with the trauma specifically. So then I'm going to skip over to the psychosis egg. And so you'll notice here that there are no defenses. So kind of like I was talking about earlier, how it would be really hard to live in a world where you have no defenses, where the unconscious is kind of bleeding through. And so this is what's happening with psychosis. There's no defenses, and there's no differentiation between the conscious and unconscious. And now I know that all instances of psychosis aren't a result of trauma, but a lot of research is showing nowadays that a lot of it is a result of like compounding trauma. So a theory here is that like enough chips away in those defenses will eventually lead to them falling. And like Jocelyn said earlier, willingness and insight is a key to utilizing SEW with someone. And so someone who's experiencing psychosis might have no reality testing, right? They might not be able to differentiate, again, what's unconscious, what's conscious. So they might not have willingness, and they might not have insight. And those are two no-goes for using SEW, right? So someone experiencing psychosis might not be a good candidate for SEW. Again, utilize your discretion as professionals. Skipping back over to this last egg, this is the personality disorder egg. And again, it's not an us versus them. It's not about, oh, this person with borderline and me as a healthy person. What it's really about is this individual has really rigid defenses. Their defenses are not permeable. And they are really rigid for a reason. I mean, it has served a purpose to protect this individual, because this unconscious material is so threatening for this individual that if any of it were to get through to the conscious, oh gosh, there's a threat of psychosis for this person, or like my whole life will fall apart. So it's really served to protect this individual. And so they have really rigid defenses, and a lot of the time it can look like it's not me, it's you, right? We kind of can conceptualize those defenses that this person in this consciousness might have. And again, reiterating willingness and insight. And so an individual with personality disorder or with really rigid defenses, I will say, might not have willingness and might not have insight because their reality testing is poor. And when I say it's poor, it's because reality is as they've deemed it. So with SCW, with something like that, again, it would be a threat for that unconscious material to become conscious. So again, checking in with your clients to see if they have willingness and insight. That's going to be really key in recognizing who you're able to use SCW with and who it might not work that well for. So, with all that being said, I'll kind of just wrap up here. We are wounded in relationship and we heal in relationship. And it all starts with your relationship to self and your own nervous system. So SCW allows for contact with the nervous system, with self, with others, and the world. With that contact, there's an awareness of what's really happening in one's own experience. And with that awareness, now we can have some choice and some reclamation of power, where I can begin to trust that I can do something about this. Whether it's I can trust my nervous system enough to ride this wave and feel as scared as I feel and knowing that I'll be able to come back to baseline, or I can trust myself to feel as angry as I feel and know that it doesn't make me an asshole or it doesn't make my partner an asshole. With enough practice, I can start to trust my partner to have feelings because I know that they're just having sensations. And that means they're just perceiving a threat, or they're just getting something that they don't want, or they're just dealing with a loss. And then taking it even further, I can start to see the whole world operating from their own states of mad, glad, sad, scared, and sexual. And I can move my own energy regarding relationships with the outside world, knowing that at any moment I have the power to deduce what's happening to my own unarguable truth. So again, you can utilize this with clients, right? And your clients don't even have to know that you're utilizing this with them. Like you could just be using this process, asking the questions, asking them to tap into their body, knowing that you have a guide of sensations, emotions, wants. Or you can teach this to your clients and they can use this. They can use this in session with you, or they can have a tool to utilize outside of session when they're really faced with their problems in the real world. You can also utilize this as a therapist yourself. You can utilize this in your own life, in your own relationships, and like I said earlier, right there in the therapy room, right there when you're in session with a client and something happens and oh, I feel that pit in my stomach, I'm scared, and I start to have sensations, right? And I can come back to what is it that I really want? I really want to come back into contact with my client. So allowing yourself to have a self, right? This allows you to have a self, and it gives room for everyone else to have a self as well and their own unarguable truths.
Yay! So we want to acknowledge Dr. Julie Caldwell, who is our supervisor, and her book, The Relationship Skills Workbook, is where you can find SEW. if you want to look at that further. And we also want to acknowledge Gay and Katie Hendricks, who have been in the cutting edge field of somatic counseling and higher consciousness living for 40 plus years, have many, many books. And Julie studied under them, and they have been a huge influence in the work that we do at Evolutionary Power Institute.
Yeah. And here are references for you to check out. And lastly, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.